everybody. My name is Kristen Silva. I am a real estate agent with New World Realty. I've been doing this a little over 5 years now, and I actually got into real estate when Corey sold me my house. I was just like enamored with it. It was like very exciting, but I had so many questions. I had no idea like who was actually doing what. So the first thing I want to touch upon is what's the difference between a buyer's agent and a listing agent. So in a real estate transaction, there are two parties involved, the person who is selling the home and the person who's trying to buy it. So the person who is selling the home hires an agent, and that agent is typically referred to as the listing agent or the seller's agent. The person who's buying the home has their own agent, and that person gets categorized within that transaction as the buyer's agent. So the buyer's agent is a licensed real estate professional who represents the buyer throughout the entire transaction until we get to the closing table and you get the keys. So in today's market, you will sometimes hear scenarios where somebody would perhaps consider using the listing agent, right? So you think maybe perhaps that your offer would be accepted if you were more inclined to use the listing agent. Because you think you have some sway, like the listing agent would want your offer to get accepted because the listing agent would be collecting both sides of that commission. And unless that listing agent is me, or Corey, or Brian, I do not recommend that. And the reason being is it takes a lot of honesty and integrity to represent two people fairly throughout a transaction. You have to become really neutral. And if you don't know that person personally, they might not have your best interests at heart throughout that transaction. And the next thing I'd like to talk about is why representation is crucial. So within that real estate transaction, as I said, that you need somebody to represent your interest and your interest alone. This is definitely probably going to be the largest financial transaction of your lifetime. Most people buy a house once, twice if you're lucky. So it really, it behooves you to have a professional representative. In a real estate transaction, there is so many moving parts behind the scene. There's a lot of people. There's the buyer's agent, the listing agent, the buyer, the seller, the lender, the underwriters for the loan, the closing attorney, the seller's attorneys, the title company, the home inspector, the appraisal. There is a million moving parts. And my job, why it's crucial to use a good, solid buyer's agent, is because I do all that behind the scenes and you don't know anything's going on. So we seamlessly connect the dots and we just get you to the closing table. Always trying to protect your sanity, your interests, and your time. And then when should you start using a buyer's agent? Yesterday, right? Even if you don't think you're ready, you are closer than you say. And if you're not quite ready to, pull the trigger on getting a pre-approval from a lender, it's still really, really helpful to start having those conversations about what you need to do to improve your credit score. Should I be closing credit card accounts? Should I be opening credit card accounts? Also, the buyer's agent can start to help you kind of fine-tune your search, right? Like the fun part of the buying side is house shopping. And of course, that's one of my duties. But before you get there, you want to make sure you're in good financial shape. You want to make sure that you have a team of real estate professionals ready to go once that transaction has started. And a buyer's agent working in your corner on day one is a great place to start. And then lastly, I'll just touch upon like some of the duties about what a buyer's agent can do. So a buyer's agent talks to each person individually about what they need, right? What are you looking for? Are you looking for a house that doesn't have stairs? How many bedrooms? Does it have to have a garage? What's your price point? What school are you looking for? So the buyer's agent works with you first about fine-tuning the research. Also, the buyer's agent will start connecting you with reputable lenders. Anyone can go Google lenders and you might get a link to something online, but a buyer's agent understands the importance of having reputable lenders in the community who have great communication and response rate. Because in this market, it's those little nuanced advantages that will absolutely get your offer chosen. So we're going to connect you to those resources, and then I'm just going to work with you at every step of the way throughout the transaction until you get the key in. So that's basically, that's what a buyer's agent is. That's what my duties are. And like I said, you should start working with me yesterday. And now I'm going to turn it over to Brian.
All right, so I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit of kind of the timeline of the home buying process. And just kind of go over some like milestone moments. And of course, when I go through this timeline, if you have us working for you as your buyer's agent, we're going to be going through this every step of the way with you. A lot of these moments that I'm going over are portions that are protecting your deposit money. So a lot of these things are important for us to be focused on and to make sure that we're sticking to this timeline. Maybe getting extensions if needed, whatnot, but just to make sure that you're protected, your deposit money is protected, and like Kristen said, we get you to the closing table. So first step is getting pre-approved. That has really become an important first step nowadays, especially after COVID. There could be a chance that we might not even be able to show you the property without supplying that pre-approval letter. So it is very important to get pre-approved. Mike and Zach are going to talk to you guys a little bit more about the pre-approval process and what that entails. But that really is the first step. And another reason why we make sure that people get that done ahead of time is that also helps us with knowing what we can show you. It's going to show, you're going to find out what your budget is, what you can afford. The last thing we want to do is have you see a home that you fall in love with, and then we go to make an offer and realize maybe you're not pre-approved for that amount, or maybe you are pre-approved for the amount, but when you actually look at what the monthly payment is, you're not comfortable with that payment. So it's very crucial to talk to the lenders ahead of time, get pre-approved, find out your comfort spot when it comes to the payments, and then that helps us find you the right home right away. Difference between an offer and purchase and sales. So this gets brought up a lot, especially because it could depend on what state you're buying in. In Massachusetts, we do have an offer first, and then we go to purchase and sales typically 10 days after that. In Rhode Island, it's a little different where we would enter purchase and sales right away, but we're gonna kind of talk, based on that we're buying a home here in Mass. So we write the offer. What I kind of say is like the offer is more of like the rough draft. The purchase and sales is gonna be a lot more detailed. There's gonna be attorneys involved in negotiating that purchase and sales. Most likely an attorney is gonna write it up. The offer is kind of like the high points. What you're offering to pay for the house, when you'd like to close on the house, contingencies such as your home inspection, your mortgage contingency, things like that. It's a quick document. I can write it up in about 10 minutes after, we go to an open house or a showing or whatever. Like I said, that's kind of like the rough draft where everything gets put into the actual formal purchase and sales agreement. Inspection period, that's going to basically begin right when the offer has been signed and accepted. It's written into our offers that we have 10 days to do a home inspection. That could be extended if needed. Typically, we don't want to do that because we do want to get the inspection done sooner than later. I have some that are done like the day after the offer is accepted. And that's to give us time to kind of go through the report, decide if we're gonna move on to the next part, which is negotiating the inspections, and just gives time to get everything in order. We have home inspectors that we can refer to you guys. Of course, if you have your own home inspector, that's perfectly fine too. But that basically, like I said, as soon as that offer is signed, that's when that 10-day countdown begins. For negotiating inspections, once you get the home inspection done, you're going to get back an extremely lengthy report from that home inspector. It could be 50 plus pages. A lot of them have images of all different portions of the house and notes that coincide with those images. What most inspectors do is kind of categorize it almost like a tier level. And the things that we're most focused on when it comes to negotiating issues are things that pop up that are listed under safety issues or like major structural issues to the home. Like I said, those are normally pointed out as kind of like, you know, the highest point of things that need to be addressed. And at that point, we can kind of decide, you know, are we going to ask the sellers to do the repairs? In lieu of repairs, sometimes we may ask for a credit. Again, this is all happening in that 10-day period, so we might need to get some contractors out to the property to price out the work that needs to be done. So again, like I said, you know, that's why we try to get the inspection done right away so that we can kind of decide if we're going to go into negotiating, you know, what the next steps are for getting contractors, getting quotes, etc. And then, like I said, you know, finding out what the sellers are willing to do, whether it be a credit or getting the repairs done. If we do have the repairs done, typically they have the full time up until closing day to get those repairs done in the house. The appraisal is going to be ordered by your bank. Now that we've negotiated home inspection, we've got the purchase and sale signed, that is typically when the bank will start working on your file heavily and having the appraisal ordered. That's not an appointment that really concerns us, but it's not really one that involves us. The appraiser typically reaches directly out to the listing agent. They schedule that appointment with the listing agent. They go out there. It's like a 10, 15 minute process. Basically, it's nowhere near as extensive as the home inspection. The appraiser is just going out there to take pictures of the house for the bank, make sure the square footage is appropriate, that's listed in MLS, and they're going to go back and write a report basically showing that the home is hopefully worth what you have agreed to pay for it. If not, there's ways to negotiate the appraisal, but that's what the appraiser is doing. Mortgage commitment, after the appraisal is submitted to the bank, they're going to need this to actually give your commitment. And basically, it is what it sounds like. It's the bank committing to loan you the money. At this point, underwriting's already, you know, deep dived into your taxes and employment. Like I said, the appraisals come back. So at this point, we know now that the house is worth whatever that value is on the appraisal report. This is another important one too, because this is kind of like our last stop at protecting your deposit money. Because at this point, you know, God forbid, if you lost your job during the process or, you know, you opened up things on a credit card or open new credit lines of credit and the bank basically denies your mortgage, you know, at this point, they should know that and we would be presenting that to get your deposit back. After mortgage commitment is the clear to close. This is done at least 3 days before the closing. This is kind of like the more final word from the bank that everything's good. You know, this is basically when all the paperwork is starting to get passed around that you're eventually going to be signing for the actual mortgage. And then there's the actual closing day. So closing day probably is going to happen at your attorney's office. Sometimes they happen at our office. It's always agreed upon, you know, really what's more convenient for you as the buyer. Typically the sellers don't go to closings anymore, especially after COVID. So it's most likely just going to be yourself and the attorneys, maybe the lender and the agent as well. And another thing for closing day, that's what we call our final walkthrough. Typically that would be done the night before the closing or potentially the morning of the closing. Earlier I mentioned that they have that time period to get repairs done. So that would be one thing that we'd be checking at the final walkthrough. If there were repairs that were agreed upon, now we want to make sure all that work's been done. Another big thing is making sure that the seller has removed all their personal property. Because basically once you sign those documents and buy the home, there's not much when it comes to recourse to, you know, oh, we realized they, never had the water line replaced, or we realized, they left a whole shed full of tools or paint or things that you don't want to get stuck with. Once you've signed, you're kind of stuck with it. So that's why we do the final walkthrough, make sure everything is in order, check if there was repairs that needed to be done, and make sure that all of their stuff's out. And then we'll be able to sign everything and give you guys the keys. So next up we have Corey, and he is going to talk to us about getting an offer accepted in this competitive market.
Thank you, Brian.
You're welcome.
Great job, too, with the timeline. It's kind of overwhelming when you hear all the steps in the process, because this is like a 45-day period that we're usually talking about when you talk about the timeline. So you just take it one step at a time and let your agent just lead you through the whole way, and that's usually the best way to go about it. I'm here to talk about, though, how to win or how to submit a competitive offer. So it's no secret or surprise that right now the market is extremely crazy. It's a lot more competitive than it has been, probably within the last 5 years. I don't think, at least in my entire career, 15 years or even past that, I know other people that have been doing it longer, have never seen a market like this before. So there's tons of bidding wars, there's tons of competition whenever you try to put an offer on a home. One tool that we use that's been working for us recently is escalation clauses. Escalation clauses actually became pretty popular about 5 years ago, after 2020 when things started going crazy. What an escalation clause is, if you don't know what it is, so if you make an offer on a home, you are going to make an offer, say, for $400,000, because that's what it's on the market for. You're going to then escalate and say, but I will escalate my offer to $450,000, but I will beat the next highest offer by $1,500. What that does is, say if whoever's in second place, what if theirs offers in at $430,000? Now you just wasted $20,000 if you just went right in at that $450,000 mark. So this way it saves you money. You're not going to go overshoot what was in second place by a huge amount of money, and it saves you cash in the long run. Next up, I get asked a lot is what's negotiable? What terms and conditions, what can I write in my offer? And this is actually the easiest question because you can write whatever you want in there. There's no rules saying what you can and cannot write. So there's already going to be standard terms that are written in there and standard conditions, and you can change that if you want to. So one thing that a lot of people ask me is, say if they go to a home and they see personal property there, like a swing set that's in someone's backyard, and they want to keep that swing set for their kids. Well, you can write in the offer that that swing set stays with the property. There's nothing wrong against that. The buyer or the sellers can say yes or no. The worst you're ever going to hear is no. So you might as well ask, you know what I mean? Like I said, a lot of things that are in these offers are fill in the blank for us. So everything is pretty much already standardly written in there. So if there are some things that are standardly written in there that you want to change, for example, in a home inspection, it basically says that if you see a fly on the wall in a room that you don't like, you can back out and get your money back. Well, that's going to scare a lot of sellers because they're not going to feel comfortable knowing that, oh, well, they can just change their mind and back out and use this as an excuse at any point in time. So what we do instead is we try to straighten up the language and the terms that are in there to make it a little bit more appealing. And I'll get to that at the very end. Next I want to talk about is what I like to call at least first in, first to negotiate. I kind of made up this term on my own, but whoever is the first person to get into a property to see it once it goes on the market is the first person who gets the opportunity to make an offer, and that's the best chance that that person has to negotiate. When you present an offer to a seller and they have nothing else in front of them, then they get, sometimes a little unknown. It's a little scary for them to want to wait to see if they're going to get something else. So we try to put the pressure on them to accept your offer right away. So if we see that this home went on the market, it's vacant, I can get the lockbox code and get you in there that day. You make an offer in that day, we can just draw it up right in the driveway. It takes me 15 minutes to write up an offer. You submit that right away. The seller then has to get back to you with a response within a reasonable amount of time. So because of that, sometimes they say, you know what? I need to sell my home right away for one particular reason, so I'm just going to go with this. And it's been several times that I've had the other agent, the listing agent, call me up a week after they've accepted an offer, and they're like, the seller is kicking themselves because they just got an offer for $10,000 higher than yours with better terms, but now they've signed the offer with your buyers and they're kind of locked in. So they will say that to you being like, basically like, don't try to pull a fast one with me because I got a good offer. as a backup. But at the same point in time, a home is only worth whatever a buyer is going to pay for it. So you can have a real estate agent come to your home to do a CMA and say this is what it's worth. You can even go have an appraiser go appraise your home, and that's an unbiased third party telling you what your home is worth. But it is only always ever worth what a buyer is going to pay for it. So if a buyer is coming in saying they'll pay $20,000 higher than you, then congratulations, you just made 20 grand that easily. Next up is flexible closing dates. That's pretty much what it sounds like as well. Like I was mentioning before, sellers have a multitude of reasons that they're going to be selling. Sometimes they might be changing a job. They're moving to Ohio. They already have a new job in place and they've already signed a lease, so they need to sell this home right away. Other times, people just want to buy a new home. They want something bigger, they want something smaller, or it'd just be nice for them to do. Because of that, you have a whole multitude of reasons of why people are selling. So when we go to submit an offer, you always want to make sure that your agent is saying to them, what is the seller's preferred closing date? Sometimes the seller wants to close in 30 days. And I can say, listen, I already had my buyers talk to Zach and Mike, and they've already gone through all of their income, they've gone through all their taxes, they've gone through all of their dotting their I's and crossing their T's. We can close this in 30 days. And then the next offer that they get, maybe their buyer hasn't been vetted that way. And so they're like, oh, well, we can only do it in 45 days. I have seen people win a bidding war for being less than what the highest offer was because they were more flexible with the closing dates than what the seller actually wanted. So the seller will be like, you know what, I'll lose out on 5 grand to not have to risk losing 10. So a lot of times it's another way that you can save money too. Last but not least, which I already touched base on, is home inspection clauses and pre-inspections. Right up there at the second line, I said, what terms and conditions in the offer are negotiable? I said everything. One of the examples I gave was that home inspection contingency, because in that contingency, it literally says if you have a home inspection and there is anything you do not like, you can back out. You can see why that would scare a seller, because a lot of times a buyer could just use that as an excuse, even if there isn't a real reason that they're backing out, right? So we add in there, if you wanted to make it a little vague, you can say it's for major mechanical or inspection issues only. That way it gives the seller some sort of reassurance that you're not going to be nitpicking on small things, and it makes them want to move forward with your offer. If you want to be even a little bit more specific, you can go further and say that the buyer will not ask to negotiate unless there is a single object that's going to cost over $5,000 to repair. And if there is an over $5,000 budget to repair for that one single item, then they will come back and ask for repairs. So there's things that you can change that are already standardly written in here to strengthen up your offer to kind of make it reflect the market that we're up against right now. Last on here, we have pre-inspections. So in some certain situations, we've actually had buyers where they know that that's going to be a crazy busy property. They want to go and give the seller an offer with no home inspection, but they don't feel comfortable doing that just yet because obviously this is the biggest purchase anyone's going to make in their life. So they're going to want to feel reassured that there's nothing or something surprising that's not going to pop up. So you can sometimes work with the sellers and the seller's agent to have an inspection done beforehand before you submit that offer. Submit your offer afterwards when that inspection is completed with no home inspection, and then you have a lot better chance of it getting accepted because you've already cut out a lot of competition that might already be asking for that. That's pretty much it that I have up on here. There's a ton of new tips and tricks that are always coming out, and new people are coming up with new things. The market's always changing. I've been doing this for 16 years, and in that time frame, we went from using fax machines to docu-signing, and now there's electronic signatures. So it changes rapidly, and things are going to continue to change. So that's why it's just always important to make sure you got the right buying team right on your side to make sure that you always get the best deal possible. Next up, I'm going to have Yulia come up here. She's an attorney with Lieberman Law Offices out of Newton, but she lives in Attleboro, so she's local with us. She's awesome, so take it away.
Hi everybody. So I'm the attorney and probably the most boring part. So I'll try to make it as entertaining and as making sense as possible. So luckily for me in Massachusetts, you are required to have an attorney when you are purchasing a home. There could be 3 attorneys in a transaction. There could be a buyer's attorney, a seller's attorney, and a closing attorney, which is a bank's attorney. But more often than not, The bank's attorney and the buyer's attorney are one person. So usually I am that one person. The reason for that is the buyer and the lender pretty much have the same interest in mind. They're all working towards the closing table, both working towards closing on the transaction. So there's no sort of called conflict of interest. So that's why the buyer's attorney usually acts as the closing attorney in the transaction. It's also interchangeable with a title attorney. So title companies have become very popular around the area. So we are a law firm, so an attorney kind of steps into the place of a title company because we take place of both. So putting on the hat of a buyer's attorney represents the best interests of the buyer. So I communicate with you guys from start to finish. It depends on you and your agent when you want to loop me in. I get looped in literally when you guys are right now, not even an offer out, or I get looped in when the inspection has already taken place. You know that you're 100% moving forward with the process, and that's when kind of the attorney jumps in. I also help Corey, Kristen, Brian. I help reviewing the offers, trying to negotiate kind of the languages, what's best in the interest for you. So that's also when usually I get phone calls. I also review the purchase and sale agreement on your behalf. So I believe Brian, Corey mentioned purchase and sale agreement, so we'll discuss that on the next slide, but it's pretty much a contract that takes place over the offer. It's a legal document negotiated by the attorney, so I do that on your behalf, keeping your best interests in mind, and I communicate with the seller's attorney. I'm kind of like the middleman since you guys can't call up the seller's attorney yourselves. So purchase and sale agreement, like I said, legal binding document. It is a contract between you and the seller. You guys are giving consideration of money to the seller for the promise for them to sell you the property. The money is the second deposit. So you have your first deposit with the offer, then you have your second deposit with a purchase and sale agreement. And the most important thing is that both of those deposits get cashed. So when you write that check, it's going to come out of your bank account. So with the purchase and sale agreement, second deposit gets written and it's cashed with the listing agent or whoever's holding the deposit. Purchase and sale agreement is anywhere from 5 to 10 to 12 pages depending on how much difficult the attorneys are. So it has the parties, who the buyer, who the seller is, the property address, whether you're buying a single, multifamily, condo, has the purchase price, the important dates, the closing dates, any kind of contingencies that were negotiated in the offer, and anything else that is in your best interest to be included in the contract. Then putting on a hat of a bank's attorney. So now we are not representing the bank, but we are acting in the best interest of you by communicating with the lender. So we communicate with their team. We put together the closing documents. We put together the closing figures that you will see a breakdown of. We order title to the property. So that is one of the biggest, biggest roles that we play throughout the entire transaction. So this is where the quote unquote title attorney comes in. So we order the title, we order tax information to the property, and then we send everything off to the lender so they can start working on their end as well. And then once it comes down to the closing table, we facilitate the closing on behalf of the lender by kind of explaining to you guys at the closing table what you're signing. So title review. Whenever you think of purchasing a home, I feel like title is a big word that comes up. So a title is pretty much a chain of ownership of documents. We send somebody to the registry of deeds. They get the documents dating 50 years back from the current owner, and it just shows us who has owned the property and what mortgages they have taken out, what else they have done with the property. So if they subdivided the lot, that all shows up in the chain of title. So we review it just to make sure that everything lines up pretty much to what you're purchasing and goes back to the purchase and sale agreement. So if you are buying lot 1, which is 123 Main Street, the chain of documents should show that seller owns lot 1 and not lot 2 or half of lot 1. So we just make sure that everything is kind of connected once it comes to the closing table and you purchasing. So this is where owner's title insurance comes in, which is a popular word when you're looking at your closing disclosure, which is a breakdown of the numbers. So we review the title, we make sure that it's clean. It's on the seller to make sure that if there's any title issues, they clean them up prior to closing. However, if something is not recorded or not registered with the registry of deeds with the town, we can't know about it. So owner's title insurance gives you guys protection when you close, that you will not have issues with these unforeseen circumstances, that you don't have to deal with them. The title insurance company kind of takes it upon themselves to pretty much give you an attorney and take it upon themselves to figure it out and get you to the closing table when you go to refinance or sell the property. So what are some common title issues? There's a bunch. Unknown liens, so mortgages that were not known about that later get recorded. That could be a 10-year mortgage. Of course, there's statutes for kind of things expiring, but there's always those circumstances that don't apply. Illegal deeds, so if somebody signed off on something that didn't own the property or wasn't in their right capacity to sign. Missing heirs, so this is very common. If a property is sold that there were family members, children, spouses, anybody that had rights to the property, then they can come forth and contest you in court and saying that you do not physically own this home, that they have rights to this house. So this is where owner's title insurance kind of helps you get you out of that mess. Forgeries, errors in public records, those are very common. Errors get made all the time. Undiscovered encumbrances, unknown easements. So there could be an easement that literally could forbid you from using half of your property. So now what is the point of you actually owning it? So that is a very common one. Boundary survey disputes. So this is very common in new construction. New construction is a hot topic nowadays. And one thing that I get is, oh, it's a new construction, why do I need owner's title insurance? Or it's a new construction, there's probably no issues, but title runs with the land, not with the actual physical building. So this land has been subdivided over and over again, so there likely could be boundary disputes that you could be kind of arguing with your neighbor later on. So owner's title insurance protects you in that. Undiscovered wills. Mary Smith could have a stepbrother that was named in her will and nobody knew about, and previous owners that did not actually own the property. So those are 10 common title issues. And last but not least, I wanted to touch base on homestead. So homestead is also a hot topic. So if you guys own a primary residence right now, you go outside, God forbid you get into a car accident. If you do, now that person's suing you in the legal court system. What are they going to go after? Your biggest asset, which is your primary residence. So homestead protects you from anybody coming after your biggest asset. In Massachusetts, you get $125,000 protection in your home, no matter what it costs. It could be a $200,000 home, it could be $1 million home. It's capped at $125,000. Then when you declare homestead, so at closing, we as your closing attorney record what's called a declaration of homestead. You get up to $500,000 each. So whoever lives in the home and is on the deed, on the mortgage, each get $500,000 protection. So now, all of a sudden, for I think the document's like $36 to record at the registry of deeds. So that's a no-brainer, and it gets recorded and lasts until you sell or get a new primary residence.
Hi everyone, my name is Mike Quinn with North Point Bank. I'm going to talk about everyone's favorite topic, finance. So I have probably an hour's worth of information that I've shaved down to 7 minutes. So I'm going to keep it very basic, very simple. And if you have any questions at the end, we'll open it up to questions. Okay, so everybody is here because they either want to buy our house, are looking to get pre-approved to buy a house, or at some point in the future want to be in a position to buy a house. So you all start with the pre-approval, which is us as a bank looking at you as a buyer and figuring out what you can afford to buy. And as a buyer, you're looking to get pre-approved because you want to know what you can afford to buy. Okay, so we look at three things when we're pre-approving a consumer, a buyer. Okay, there's three main things we're looking at. I see you're looking at. I know, $150,000 house. I know. Bear with me here. That's like 2012. So we're looking at three things. We break the entire process down. It may feel overwhelming, but it is actually very simple. We look at three things. We look at your income, so what can you afford? We look at your down payment, because that's going to dictate what type of program you can go into. Are you doing 100% financing? Are you doing 20% down conventional? The third thing we look at is your credit. So your credit scores are going to dictate if you qualify or not. And if you do qualify, what program are we going with? Are we going with FHA? Are we doing a conventional loan, or do we have to go with some funky outside the box portfolio loan? So I'll talk briefly about each topic, and let's see. So affordability. Okay, so affording a mortgage when you get pre-approved protects two people. It protects us as the bank to make sure that if we're lending you the money, we're not going to be taking the house back in 6 months because you can't afford it. Okay. It also protects the buyer because you don't want to buy a house that you can't afford. Okay. So we're looking at your income. Okay. If you're a W-2 employee, we're looking at your pay stubs. We're looking at your W-2s. If you're self-employed, we're looking at tax returns. So general rule of thumb to keep it as simple as possible. Okay, from the bank's perspective, because there's two different perspectives you have to look at. From the bank's perspective, your mortgage payment with taxes and insurance included cannot be more than, in most cases, 45%, but generally speaking, around 43% of your total gross income. Okay, so that's called an income ratio. Okay, so a debt to income ratio. So you want to make sure that your house payment is less than 45% of your gross income. Your total debt to income ratio takes into account all of your other liabilities. So student loans, car payments, credit card payments, takes everything into account, and that needs to be 50% or less of your total gross income. Okay, some programs allow you to go up to 55%. Like an FHA loan, you can go up to 55% of your gross income. So, for example, if you make $5,000 a month, your max liabilities between your mortgage payment and all your debt can't be more than $2,500. Okay? Now, that's the bank's perspective. You as a homeowner don't necessarily want to be spending 50% of your gross income on a mortgage payment and your credit card bills. Because if you're making $5,000 a month, you're probably taking home $3,800. So if you're spending $2,500 a month just on your mortgage payment and your credit cards, you still need to have money left over for utilities, for gas, for electric, for drinks on a Friday night after work. You need to have disposable income because nobody wants to say to their friend, sorry, I can't go out tonight. The mortgage payment's due on the 1st. All right, so it's important to do a full review of income so everybody is protected. Credit score is something that should be handled very early on in the process. Everybody should know what their credit is, okay? So there's free credit reporting agencies out there. I mean, there's one listed there, but those free credit reporting agencies report different credit scores than what we're going to report, okay? So you might go to Credit Karma and they might say you have a 720. I pull a credit, it might be a 680, okay? So I think a real estate agent's worst fear is showing someone houses, which is why they want you to get pre-approved so early on in the process. Showing someone a house for 3 months, and then they find one they like, and they go, okay, now I'm going to apply for a mortgage. And I go, I am so sorry that you have been driving around for 3 months. They have like a 520 credit score. okay? So do that early on, tackle it early on, because if you do have a 520 credit score, which we see all the time, we'll put you on the roadmap to get up to the 620, 700, whatever program you want, we'll put you on that path. But if you don't start early, before you want to start shopping, then it's probably going to be too late, because you can't jump 50, 60 points overnight. So it does take a little bit of time. So we'll work on that. Okay, down payments. So down payments are, the market is changing so rapidly. It used to be 20% down. I think everybody knows that you don't need 20% down now anymore to buy a house. So if you're a first-time home buyer, you can do 100% financing, which is no down payment. You can do a 3% conventional loan. You can do 5%. So there's all various options. So we try to pick what makes the most amount of sense for you. So if you said, Mike, you know what? I have 40,000 in the account, but I don't want to drain it all, because once we close and we're moved into the house, we want to buy furniture, we want to paint, we need a little bit of money for a rainy day fund. We will pick the down payment that makes the most sense for you. Okay, you kind of back into a payment. So if you said, I need to be at $2,000 a month, we'll figure out what price point that translates to and how much you have to put down to get there. Okay, so knowing your options up front and what that translates to in payment is going to save you a lot of aggregate. So as far as down payment, because I do work with a lot of first-time home buyers, the first question I always said is, oh, do we have 100% financing? Yes, we do. Okay, but 100% financing options are not always your best bet. Okay, because if you're going through a state agency program, sometimes it's a little bit more challenging to get an accepted offer on a property. So we explore other options. But Mike, I just told you I don't have any money for a down payment. All right, well, do you have a 401k? Yes, I do. I have 80,000 in. If you pull $20,000 out, which people tend to think, well, but it's for retirement, I don't want to do that. Why would I do that? You're taking from one investment and you're putting it into another investment. All right. So if you have the funds available, that $20,000 that's going to allow you to buy a house, in 10 years, the equity that you're going to gain in that is going to make more actually in the property than you would in a 401k. So it is taking from one investment to another. So that's a good option. Another one is a gift from a family member. So as long as it's a family member and we can source where the money came from, parents do it all the time, brothers, sisters. I really want to give my son, my daughter a closing gift. There it is, $20,000. Apply it towards the down payment. So as long as we can document that, that is a reasonable source for a down payment. And that's going to maybe open you up, instead of doing an FHA loan through Mass Housing, Rhode Island Housing, maybe you can do a conventional loan because you have the 3 or the 5% now. And that's going to go a long way when submitting an offer. Okay, so once the offer is accepted, quick abstract, I know Brian kind of touched on this a little bit, but the process of the mortgage is pretty simple. Okay, it's kind of, we just ask you for documentation, you give it to us, and we do everything behind the scenes. It's not, shouldn't be stressful, it shouldn't be anxiety ridden. So we take all of your information up front, okay? We do the application. Once you go on a contract, we're going to take that application, we're going to just reconfirm everything is still accurate. Okay, we're going to get updated bank statements, updated documents, because if you've been shopping for 3-4 months, well, now all that time has passed and the pay stubs I have in file are 3 months old. So we just want to re-verify everything. And we'll send you out loan disclosures. Loan disclosures are overwhelming because it's 80 pages. Okay, about 4 pages actually relate to your mortgage. Everything else is a general disclosure. We'll go over everything. It's very simple. Every bank, every lender has the same disclosures, they're just general. Okay? We'll send that out, you sign it. We get all the rest of the documents, we're going to submit it to underwriting. Okay? Once it goes into underwriting, that's when you're doing home inspection. That's when you're doing, because I don't actually wait until you're under purchase and sales. In Mass, if you have a signed offer, I don't want to waste any time. I want to take that and I submit your loan based off of that. If it falls through during inspections, so what? We cancel the loan, we start over on the next one. Okay? So we'll order appraisal, we'll do your rate lock, and get everything over to the underwriter. Once it's over at the underwriter's desk, 24, 48 hours, she's going to go through the whole file. Okay, she's going to review it, issue what's called a conditional loan approval. Once you get that conditional loan approval, it's going to have conditions on there that you need to satisfy for a clear to close. So you will get one nice little email from me that says, the underwriter asked, you gave a $20,000 deposit check. They want to just show it coming out of your bank account, so provide an updated bank statement and an updated pay stub. And usually there's not much else because we kind of have everything. So once we get those documents from the buyer, we'll resubmit it back into underwriting for a clear to close. Once the underwriter reviews everything, she's going to issue the final clear to close, sign off on all the conditions, and the next step would be closing day. So you're going to, we'll give you all the numbers on what's needed for the certified bank check day of closing. You're going to take that check, go to the closing, sign your name, and then you get handed the keys. And that is it. The mortgage process really is not that difficult. It can just be very overcomplicated if you're not working with the right lender. And I forget who mentioned it, but it's super, super important to work with a local lender who's in the community that has relationships with the listing agents, so you can pick up the phone, call them. You know, Quicken Home Loans, I use them because they're easy to use, but they're out in Michigan, no one answers the phone and there's no service. So if there is an issue that arises, nobody can get a hold of that person, okay? So it is important to use someone who's local in the community and knows what they're doing and can just get the job done. So I'll hand it over to Zach because he's going to go over a little bit about what, some things that sets North Point apart on the buying process that will help a buyer actually get an accepted offer.
How's everybody doing? Good volume. So my name is Zach, as Mike said, and obviously there's a lot of experience in this room, and Mike and I have been working together for too long, right? Probably 15 years combined. The funny thing about finance is that even though we've been doing this for so long, we'll have questions when we get asked, specific questions on transactions. So if you do have questions after all of this, don't feel silly or stupid if you put your hand up and you think it's a dumb question, because I still ask dumb questions to people in my company every day, and I've been doing it for a long time. So true approval. Does anybody in here know the difference between a pre-approval and a pre-qualification? Does anybody know the difference? Not somebody on the panel. Anybody want to guess? No. Come on. You spoke. Let's do it.
Okay, so I would say pre-qualifications first before the pre-approval.
What's that? I don't want you to look.
I didn't read it.
Oh, okay. You said what? I'm sorry.
I don't know. Pre-qualification before the pre-approval? Does one come before the other? Did I say that?
No, so they're different, right? So a pre-qual, and most people don't know this. So before I get into true approval and what that is, it's important to know the difference between a pre-qualification and a pre-approval. So a pre-qualification, that's kind of what everybody hears. And then when Corey and Brian were talking about getting a pre-approval, most realtors are going to require that on the listing side. So if you're a buyer, most realtors are going to require a pre-approval just to know that you're legitimate, you can get finance. A pre-qualification is another step that certain lenders take to vet the clients up front before an offer goes in. So your normal pre-approval, a client will submit information and the originator will collect. So let's say that you apply with Michael, right? He's gonna ask for your tax returns, pay stubs, bank statements, all the important things that go into making a loan decision and underwriting decision. When most lenders, if not all, when they collect this information, we've been doing it for a while, so we'll put everything together and we'll kind of make a determination. We're not underwriters, but we'll look at your credit profile, look at your income, assets, everything, and say, hey, you're good. Here's a pre-qualification. Go buy a house. So that's the normal course of action. And that's a pre-qual, right? So a pre-approval is when a lender takes another step and has an underwriter review your information up front before you put that offer in. So this is really unique. And that's the biggest difference between a pre-approval and a pre-qualification. So a pre-approval is another step that the lender takes. And if you've listened a lot to people that have talked tonight, the thing that keeps coming up and that resonates, especially in this market, if you pay attention, is that this is the most competitive market any of us have ever seen. And I've been doing this since 2003. Mike, I think you're probably the same year. And maybe it sounds like a goofy sales pitch, but this is without a doubt the most competitive period that I've seen. And I would, if I had to bet, probably April and May will be even worse, mainly because we're all expecting interest rates to come down. And I'm not saying that to be negative, I'm just saying it's going to be harder potentially as a buyer. So one of the important things that, when Corey and I were talking about this and we put everything together, if you're looking for a realtor or a lender, interest rates are important, experience is important, all of that. But if there's one thing that you should focus on as a buyer, it's making sure you're working with the team that understands how competitive the market is and that will be able to accentuate your offer by whatever their own individual offerings are. So the real estate side today said we're going to do A, B, and C, escalation clauses, all these tools that they're going to use to help your offer stand out and put you in front of the other maybe 15, 20 buyers that are offering on the same property. So on the lending side, we do true approval. And what true approval is forget the pre-qualification. It's a pre-approval that's backed by our underwriters. So our process with a true approval, we're going to collect. So if you work with Michael, again, we're going to collect income documents, asset statements, everything that a loan originator would normally require. But we're going to gather that and send it to underwriting before you even find your house. So it's not an extra step that you're taking. We're just doing it earlier in the process so that when you get a pre-approval from North Point, it states on there that an underwriter has already reviewed your credit, income, assets, everything. And without a doubt, on the lending side, that stands out more than anything, right? And have you guys seen these like pre-approvals before, like this specific? Like some lenders call them different things, but with true approval, and Michael does it on most, if not all, of his clients. That's the extra step that we're taking. It's more work, so it might be a little more for you up front, for us when we collect all the documents up front, but your offer will absolutely stand out because, as Mike said before, the national lenders that sometimes we compete with, a lot of them just take applications over the phone and they don't even collect documents, which is seems like wild and negligent, but a lot of lenders do that. If you call a national lender, you're talking to them across the country. Oh, what do you make, sir? Oh, great. Sounds good. Here's a pre-approval. Lenders literally do that. And the realtors in this room could probably name 4 or 5 lenders that do that without even vetting or collecting the information. So we went through the difference between a pre-qualification and a pre-approval. So with true approval, and this is, although there are some other lenders that do it, I can tell you that in our market, I know of maybe 2 or 3 originators that actually do it because it is extra work up front to get the underwriting commitment before. But not only does it help you to stand out and make your offer look stronger if it's a multiple offer situation, but it actually expedites and makes the closing more efficient when you go under contract. So when you let's say that you get pre-approved on a true approval for $500,000, it's subject to the actual property that you're going under contract with, obviously, but your loan approval would be TBD as far as the specific location of the house. So if you get true approved, you go under contract, your offer is accepted. When we send that loan into underwriting, they've already underwritten 75% of your loan. So we don't have to go back in and re-review the things that they've already signed off on. So it already expedites the closing when your offer is in. And at the end of the day, there's a silly saying in real estate, like nothing good happens with time. And especially in this type of market, if you're a seller and you have 10, 15, 20 offers and you go under contract, the only thing that you want to do is close. And you want to close as efficiently as possible. So our process is it's going to get your offer looked at and put above other offers. And I've seen in many cases where I'll get a call on a client and our offers are accepted even though they're lower than other offers, which sounds like crazy, right? But it's not, because people would rather take the sure thing rather than take a chance on either a bank or maybe it's a client that they think has a credit issue. Most lenders, if the offer is close, is going to go with the bank that they trust, and also if the loan quality they think is higher. And at the end of the day, if a pre-approval has a loan commitment already in the file, it's pretty unique. So the eligible programs, being that a bank, and we didn't really get into it, we have, I would say, more products than like most of our competitors. We don't offer true approvals on every single product that we have because we literally have hundreds of programs at the bank. But the normal true approval programs that we use it for are just your regular conforming loan. So Mike went over some conforming loan options. Usually a conforming loan is 3 to 5% down minimum. A lot of people don't realize it, but you can do a 3% down conventional 30-year fixed Fannie Mae loan. A lot of people think it's like 5% down, but it's actually 3. We'll do it on FHA loans, VA, some of our portfolio, some of our expanded access, but we don't really just pigeonhole the true approval to like a couple different products, which is important. So the offers accepted, you know, what's next? And I'm not gonna go through this specifically because Mike kind of did, but you know, you submit your purchase agreement, you go through ordering, appraisal, title, inspections. Basically, it's the same timeline that Brian talked about. It's really no different inside the loan process. Okay, maybe that's it. I prepared really well. I guess you can tell. So I know we kind of threw a lot at you, especially on the financing side, and I think we wanted to open up, you know, to any questions that you guys had for any of the content tonight, I guess, on the title side, financing side, realtor side. Somebody that has to have questions, come on.
Got any questions for anyone?
I do.
Yes.
Yes,
What is the max for a gift?
the match?
The max amount
Well,
for a gift?
yeah, so it depends on, there really is no max. I mean, it depends on the loan program. Something that's really important because we're in kind of like an investment property, everybody wants to be an investor type of environment. There's not many programs that allow a gift on a property that you're not occupying. But we do have programs at North Point that allow for that. But most like first of all, FHA, does everybody know what FHA loan is? You can't, it has to be an owner occupied. FHA doesn't do non-owner occupied, but generally on a conventional loan, Fannie Mae doesn't allow for gifts if it's an investment property. But to answer your question,
If it's not an investment property.
it's, yeah,
So for financing, there is no max of a gift.
There is none?
Nope, there's none. For the IRS, if you're gonna claim that gift on your returns, which you have to self-claim,
Yeah.
which I've spoken to my accountant many times about this, no one ever does it. Okay, but I think there is a max of it. It's either 14,500 or 20,000 or something like that for the number. But for financing, there is no max.
There is a limit on the credit that you're asking for. So maybe like
you're talking about seller concession?
like a concession.
You're saying a gift from like a family member or a friend for the down payment? Yeah.
But like,
So-
like you offered 400,000, but wanted 100,000 back as like a closing cost credit.
Yeah, no.
And the only,
So I just did one for specifically in Barrington, 550 purchase price, and they got a gift of 200,000.
and the only caveat with gifts are, most of the time it has to be a long-standing relationship or blood relative. Not always blood relative, but it has to be somebody that you have like a long-standing relationship with. And it can't be a gift from the seller.
Okay.
Unless there's a gift of equity, if there was like a family, which is a totally different thing. Yes?
If I own property but I don't have a mortgage, am I still considered a first-time home buyer?
No.
Well,
It's title. So
yeah.
if your name's on a title of any property in the last 3 years, then you're not considered a first-time home buyer. So,
2020, so is that?
so you could actually have your name on a mortgage, not on title.
No, but 2020 is
It's not a
older.
mortgage, it's not a
So,
mortgage.
there's the first-time home buyer thing, like that's specific to specific programs. Like a lot of people think like there's such a disadvantage if you're not a first-time home buyer. There are certain programs that you can qualify for being a first-time home buyer, but like that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a better rate because you're a first-time home buyer. It's dependent on the program. Like Rhode Island Housing, Mass Housing, you got to be a first-time home buyer to get into that no money down. But if you were going to put money down, so if let's just say you were doing a regular loan, putting 3% down and buying a house, whether you're a first-time home buyer or not doesn't really make that much of a difference or change in the interest rate or anything. But there are programs that you can qualify for that others can't, being a first-time home buyer.
So if your credit score is not where you want it to be, the other side, cool it like the way you're talking, it's not great. What is the best way, or like, what do you want to
How we get it up there?
Yeah, what do we gotta do?
So initially, well, it's going to be different for everyone, right? So you're going to run your credit and do a credit analysis
Yeah,
and figure out what you specifically need to do in your credit report to get the score.
okay.
Okay, so for someone who has 10,000 in collection accounts, that's going to take a little bit longer to get those scores up.
Right.
Because you pay off the collection accounts, that's going to take a little bit of time. Then they have 90 days to report to the credit bureaus. Then sometimes they don't report, so then you have to get involved. So that can take longer. Someone could also have 4 credit cards with a $1,000 limit, them all be maxed out, and that could drop your score to 150 points.
More like student loan, for example.
Like our
Yeah.
student loans and parents and student credit.
Yeah, so the student loans just outstanding.
Oh, no, they're being paid.
Yeah.
Actually, a lot of debt.
Is it being paid?
Yeah, so sometimes like the
Well-
amount of debt.
Say they
the-
were like not paid for like maybe like a few months and they started paying them again.
Yeah.
That's really what it was like.
So with student loans and installment debt,
Yeah.
the 1-year window is really like a big thing. Once you hit that 12th payment of on-time payments, and
Yes.
those lates drop off,
Yes.
you'll see a nice little jump in your scores.
And it's also not like it's not just historical, like improving credit. Like there's a lot of things that you can do moving forward, like taking out secured credit cards, opening up new revolving lines of credit and paying on time. Credit is not only just paying on time, but it's also, to Mike's point, credit is negatively affected if you're drawing to the higher balance. So if you have a credit card limit of $2,000 and you're always hovering around $19,000 to $2,000 a month, that will bring your credit down. So like if you have the ability to pay down some credit cards and keep a margin between what the balance is and what the balance limit is, a lot of people will call if you've been paying a credit card on time but you're hovering near the high balance, try and call and ask for a credit increase, because if you get a credit increase, it'll go to your credit, and then that'll positively impact your credit because you're not drawn to the high credit limit anymore.
On the opposite end, like say you don't have it, would you suggest opening one to get it higher?
Yeah, secured line. Yeah,
You
and,
need-
yeah,
you need
absolutely.
debt to have credit
So I
scores.
mean, I have a student loan debt.
Yeah.
I'm
So
like,
so I always suggest 3 credit cards, right?
3.
3, right? Keep your limits always at 30% of whatever, or the balance of 30% of whatever the limit is.
Okay.
That's going to take, so if you have no credit at all, it takes
Right.
6 months of on-time reporting for a score to even pop up. So they really look at that 6-month mark and they kind of gauge that. But if probably the best thing that you could do, if you have availability to do so, is become an authorized user on someone else's credit card. So like for me, when I turned 18, my parents were like, well, I'm authorized user. I never even knew it. So by the time I bought my house, I had a Macy's credit card and I had a 800 credit score. And I'm like, oh, that's great. How did that happen?
Right.
And it's because my parents had a $20,000 limit on a credit card they never used, and I was an authorized user. So
Okay.
there are certain tricks and things that
Yeah.
you can do. And it could just be, hey, Old Navy credit card for $300 that's maxed out. That could actually be costing you 20 points. So there are certain things that you can do.
There's also for credit, like if you were to apply with us and your credit wasn't where it needed to be, we can run what's called a credit simulator. And based upon if you had a certain allocation of money, let's say you had $2,000, it'll tell us specifically where to apply that money on your credit and pay things down. And it will give a range of credit that your credit will go up to. And we can actually send it into the credit bureaus and your credit will go up. It's all the time we'll take applications and pull credit, and sometimes, the good thing is it's better to know up front if you really want to buy a house. It's almost like nobody wants to go to the doctor, but like you got to go to the doctor. So it's best to just try the application, pull credit. There's some clients that Mike could pull your credit and say, hey, you got to do A, B, C, D, and E. You're 6 months out, but it is what it is. You're 6 months out anyway. So if you really want to buy a house, it's better to know exactly what you need to do to get your credit in the right shape to buy, because you're never going to know if you don't take the application. Does anybody have any other questions? Sure. I like that you were paying attention today. Yeah.
So someone who doesn't have like a conventional 401k, I run my own business, I do this, I have 529s, investment accounts that have a limit on like, I'll just use my 529. I can only pull a certain amount before I have to be taxed on that money. If I did that with like 2 or 3 investment accounts to get a down payment, as long as I can show that money trail like that.
As long as we can source it and show where it came from, then yes.
Okay.
Yep, it can come from multiple sources.
Now, whatever tax burden is yours, we wouldn't ever care if you were, I mean, nobody likes to get taxed, but
Yeah,
we
I
would,
just wanted to be able
yeah.
to like show that like, hey, this money is coming from 3 accounts because it's.
One of the biggest pains in the ass, is that on video, that we have to deal with is tracking money and tracking assets because everybody moves money around. So just be cognizant of the fact if you're buying a house, we always look 60 days back on anything. So let's say, for instance, you have a 403B, whatever you have some security, some account, and you take $20,000 and you put it into your checking account because that's what your down payment is. We wouldn't just ask for, and it's not just North Point, this is just like everybody, we wouldn't just ask for an account statement that showed the transfer to your checking. We would want 60 days prior to show that money didn't come into that account. So like, to be honest with you, that's probably the worst part of our job because everybody moves money all the time, checking, savings, all over the place. So that's kind of like the most arduous part of it. So to Mike's point, as long as we can track it within those 60 days, you might have to give us a lot of documents, but if it's legitimately yours, you have nothing to worry about.
Okay. And then credit score wise, like if you're married, partner, whatever, 2 very different scores, are you guys averaging that out? How do you do that?
So unfortunately, you go off the middle credit score of the lower of the 2 borrowers.
Okay.
So there are a lot of occasions where we don't need both people's income. So we might just drop one person off the loan and say, hey, no hard feelings, but we'll throw you on title. So you can be on title because title it's who has ownership of the property. The mortgage is who's responsible for making the payment. So a lot of people do it as a strategy of, let me just go on title and, sorry, my alarm's going off. Let me go on, we'll use, you have a 780 credit score, your spouse has a 620, you have enough income, we'll just use you. If she goes, but I want to be on the mortgage. No, we'll leave you off, but you'll go on title. That's the only thing that matters.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of like playing with student loans.
And it almost, and sometimes it's like a strategy where if people are just dating, they're not married, and they don't feel like they really want to buy the house, but together, but they're using the funds from one person, and they're a little apprehensive about buying it together. They might say, let me just put myself on the mortgage. We'll both go on title because God forbid if anything ever happened and you break up, you don't have to refinance the mortgage to remove that person from the mortgage. You just have to do a $100 quitclaim deed and just take them right off the title.
But they got to sign off the title. That's the key. Believe me, I've seen like, it's more.
It's a lot easier to do it that way. So yeah, there's a lot of that. Yep.
And sometimes, like, let's say for instance, you're applying with somebody and you have a 720 score and the other person has a 680, but to Mike's point, you only need one of the incomes. You might get a half a point better in rate because we're taking the other individual off the loan with a 680. And, credit, especially with rates, rates have gone down a lot recently. What your credit score is like really, really important as far as what interest rate you're going to get. And it always has been in this industry and it always will be.